When we look at the Mona Lisa, it's easy to see just one of the greatest paintings ever made. But what if I told you we're also looking at a scientific document, a masterclass in optics, anatomy, and even physics? Today, let's get into how Leonardo da Vinci, the scientist, is totally inseparable from Leonardo the artist.
So Leonardo famously said, "The eye is the window to the soul." We've all heard it. But for him, this wasn't just some poetic line. He was obsessed with this window, not just what it said about us on the inside, but how it physically, mechanically worked. He really saw it as a little piece of divine engineering.
And that's the question that drove everything he did. He was convinced that to truly capture life, to make something on a canvas feel alive, you couldn't just be an artist. You had to be a scientist first. You had to understand the nuts and bolts of how we see before you could ever hope to trick someone's eye.
Now, this scientific deep dive led him to create one of the most mysterious and famous techniques in all of art history, sfumato. You know it when you see it, that signature, smoky, almost dreamlike quality that makes his paintings breathe.
The word literally comes from fumo, the Italian for smoke, and it's not just about blurring lines. Sfumato is a direct imitation of how our vision actually works. Think about it. Only what you're looking at directly is in sharp focus. Everything else is kind of soft around the edges. Leonardo was painting that peripheral softness, and it's what makes his world feel so real.
And the way he achieved this is just mind-boggling. We're talking about dozens upon dozens of super-thin, translucent layers of glaze. Some of these layers are only a few micrometers thick, thinner than a human hair. The whole point was to make the shift from light to dark so incredibly gradual that your eye can't find a single hard line or a brushstroke. It's just seamless.
So, how on earth did a guy in the 15th century pull off an effect so subtle that we're still analyzing it with high-tech scanners today? Well, the answer isn't some magical artist's secret. It's found in his notebooks, in his obsessive scientific research. And before we dive into those notebooks, please remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. Share and like our videos. The information in the video is compiled from open sources. Thank you.
Okay, so all of this research, all of this work was guided by one core philosophy. It was a simple two-word phrase that defined his entire life. Saper Vedere.
Saper Vedere. To know how to see. For Leonardo, seeing wasn't a passive thing that just happened to you. No, it was an active analytical process. It was about deconstruction. To paint the world, he felt he had to take it apart piece by piece, figure out the rules, and only then could he put it back together with paint.
And what's wild is that his process was, for all intents and purposes, the modern scientific method, centuries before it was formalized. He'd study what others had written, he'd come up with his own ideas based on what he saw, and then, and this is the most important part, he'd test it with his own experiments.
And his lab, well, it was anywhere and everywhere. To understand how we see, he didn't just read books about eyes, he got his hands dirty. He dissected the eyes of cows and even humans. He even came up with this brilliant, if kind of gruesome technique of boiling an eye in egg white. Why? Because it would solidify the whole thing, letting him slice it in half to see all the internal parts without it just turning to mush.
So through all this obsessive study, he broke down vision into these 10 key functions. Things like light, color, distance, motion. He basically created a scientific checklist. He believed if a painter could truly understand and master the science behind each of these 10 things, they could paint reality itself.
And maybe his single most important tool for cracking the code of vision wasn't a paintbrush or a chisel. It was a scientific instrument called the camera obscura. A camera obscura, which just means dark chamber in Latin, is a surprisingly simple concept. You take a box or a whole room, make it completely dark, and then poke one tiny little hole in a wall. Light from the outside streams through that pinhole and projects a perfect, full-color, but upside-down, image on the opposite wall. You can just feel the pure awe in his writing about this. Oh, what a point is so marvelous. For him, seeing the entire universe squished down into this one little point of light, it felt like a miracle. And he knew it was the key to understanding sight. Because he had a massive realization. The human eye is a camera obscura. It's a biological one. Our pupil is the aperture, that little pinhole. The lens in our eye focuses the light. And our retina, that's the back wall where the image is projected. This analogy became the fundamental model for everything he did next.
So armed with this scientific model of the eye, he could finally put theory into practice. He could start to paint not just what he was looking at, but how he was looking at it. He literally started painting with the properties of light and air.
He was one of the very first people to really nail down the rules of what we call atmospheric perspective. He observed that the farther away something is, the less contrast and detail it has, and its color sort of washes out and shifts towards blue.
Sound familiar?
Well, today we know the scientific reason for this is something called Rayleigh scattering. It's literally the same reason the sky is blue. Particles in the air scatter blue light more than other colors. Leonardo didn't have the fancy name for it, but he saw the effect with his own eyes and replicated it perfectly.
And this brings us right back to the Mona Lisa. That famous hazy blue mountain range behind her, that's not just a pretty background, it's not just some stylistic choice. It's a scientific demonstration. He is literally painting the air between the viewer and the mountains.
And that, right there, is the whole point. For Leonardo da Vinci, there was no line in the sand between art and science. They were the same thing.
The great art historian Kenneth Clark put it perfectly. He said all these things, the science, the skill, the pure curiosity, they all just meld together so seamlessly in Leonardo's work that you don't even realize the science is there at first. It's just part of the magic.
Because to him, painting was the ultimate science. It was the highest form of investigation, the only way to truly capture and communicate all the incredible complexity and beauty of the natural world.
Which really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? Leonardo was the living embodiment of art and science fused together. In our modern world, where we love to specialize and put everything in its own little box, you have to wonder, what have we lost by separating the artist from the scientist? What kind of beauty are we missing out on?